I woke up that morning with a heavy feeling in my chest, as if something invisible was pressing on my heart. 30 years of marriage had taught me to trust such premonitions, but I'd written it off to fatigue and spring malaise. Outside my window was a typical Argentine Tuesday in early March. The sun had already risen above the red tile roofs of our small town, but the chill of night was still in the air. Our house on San Martin Street was waking up with me. The floorboards creaked somewhere, the antique clock in the living room ticked, the birds in our garden chirped outside the window. Federico was up before me, as usual. 30 years of marriage had accustomed me to his habits. Rising at 7:30, a shower, coffee and toast, and then an hour of paperwork in the study before heading to the main store on the square. He was a man of the regime, and that always reassured me. Everything in our family was predictable, measured, reliable. I reached my hand toward his side of the bed. The sheets were already cold, so he'd been up for a while. Sometimes, when he had problems with suppliers or complicated negotiations with landlords of new premises, Federico woke up even earlier and could sit in his office for up to 2 hours, poring over papers and making calculations. I walked leisurely down to the kitchen, where Rosario was already preparing breakfast. Our housekeeper had been with us for 15 years and knew our habits better than we did. A woman from a neighboring village who had lost her husband in a car accident, she had come to us when the girls were still teenagers. Rosario became almost a member of the family. Silent, reliable, always knew what to do in any situation. "Good morning, Rosario," I said, tying my robe tighter. March mornings in our province were still chilly. "Good morning, Señora Valeria," she replied, nodding silently at me. Rosario was always a bit taciturn, especially in the mornings. She continued slicing oranges neatly, just the way Federico liked them. The coffee pot was bubbling on the stove. Federico didn't recognize instant coffee, saying that real coffee should be brewed according to all the rules. I poured myself into my favorite white cup, added 2 spoons of sugar and a little milk. The flavor was rich, invigorating, but for some reason, it didn't feel good today. "Is Federico still in the study?" I asked, sipping my coffee and looking out the window at our small garden. The rose bushes that my husband and I had planted the first year we bought the house were starting to bud. "Yes, Señora. She's been sitting there with papers since this morning. He hasn't even touched his breakfast." Rosario pointed to an untouched plate of toast and jam. I came by twice, offered to eat, but he just waved his hand. It wasn't like him. Federico never missed a morning meal, saying it was the foundation of the day, that no serious decisions could be made without breakfast. Even on the busiest days, when there were problems in the stores or suppliers were down, he always found time for a morning meal. "Maybe he's having trouble with the meat supply again?" I suggested. "Yesterday he said Garcia was late again. I don't know, Señora, but he looked tired this morning, and pale." I finished my coffee and decided to see if everything was okay. I took a second cup and poured coffee for my husband. He liked it stronger, without milk, with 1 spoonful of sugar. Maybe work was taking too much of his energy. Lately, he often stayed out late at the stores and came home tired and silent. Our house was built in the traditional colonial style: thick walls, high ceilings, long hallways with stone floors. Federico's office was at the far end of the house, next to the library. He had arranged it to his liking: a massive oak desk, leather armchairs, shelves with folders of documents, pictures of our stores and family portraits on the walls. The door was ajar, and I could see his silhouette at the large wooden desk. Federico sat leaning back in his chair, his head tilted back a little. The posture was unnatural, tense. He usually sat upright, leaning slightly over his papers. "Federico, breakfast is getting cold," I said, entering the room and setting the cup on the edge of the table. "Rosario made your favorite toast with peach jam." He didn't answer, didn't move, didn't turn his head in my direction like he usually did when I walked into his office. The cup slipped from my hands and shattered on the parquet, spilling hot coffee all over the floor. Brown stains spread across the light-colored wood, but I ignored it. "Federico!" I called louder, thinking he was dozing off at work. I ran to him, grabbed him by the shoulders, and shook him. His body felt strangely heavy and listless. His head shook like a rag doll, His face was waxy pale, his lips bluish, his eyes half open and unfocused on anything. On the desk in front of him was a stack of documents, invoices from suppliers, leases, some handwritten notes. The pen was still clutched in his right hand, fingers stiffened in an unnatural position. "Federico! Federico!" I shouted, shaking him harder and harder by the shoulders. "Wake up! Please wake up!" I tried to feel for a pulse on his neck, but my fingers were shaking so hard I couldn't feel anything. My heart was beating so loudly in my temples that it drowned out all other sounds. My throat was dry, my breath hitched. "No, no, no, no," I whispered, pressing my ear against his chest, trying to hear his heartbeat. Nothing. Just silence. Rosario came running into the room, hearing the sound of a broken cup and my screams. She took one look at the situation, not the first time she'd faced death in her life, apparently. "Good Lord," she whispered, crossing herself quickly with her right hand. "Senora Valeria, we need to call a doctor. Immediately." I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. My legs wouldn't hold me up. My eyes were dark. Rosario took me under her arms and helped me to a chair in the corner of the office. "Senora, breathe deeply. Breathe," she repeated, simultaneously grabbing the phone on the desk and dialing the ambulance. "Hello? An ambulance? I need immediate medical attention. The address is 123 St. Martin Street. Male, 58 years old, unconscious, not breathing. Yes, I understand. As soon as possible." Rosario spoke clearly and calmly, although I could see that her hands were shaking too. After the call, she walked over to Federico, gently took his wrist, checking his pulse, put her ear to his chest. "Senora," she said quietly. "I think he's already gone." The words didn't fit in my head. Federico could not have left. He was a strong, healthy man. Yes, lately he sometimes complained of fatigue, of back pain from sitting at his desk for so long, but he'd never had any serious health problems. We were planning a trip to Buenos Aires for the next month. We wanted to visit Catalina, to see the new apartment she was renting. Time dragged on interminably slowly. I sat in the chair and looked at my husband, trying to figure out what was happening. This couldn't be reality. This was a nightmare that I was about to wake up from. Rosario was fussing around, wiping up spilled coffee, picking up cup shards, but she was very quiet, trying not to break the silence. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later, though it seemed like an eternity to me. First, I heard the siren in the distance, then the sound got closer, louder and louder, until it stopped right in front of our house. Then the doors slammed, voices were heard, quick footsteps on the stone walkway. 2 paramedics in white coats and a young doctor entered the office. The doctor was a young man whom I didn't know. He must have recently come to work in our town. He had a serious face and attentive eyes. He quickly approached Federico, checked his pulse, listened to his heart, examined his pupils, and did some other manipulations that I didn't understand. The paramedics were standing next to the stretcher, but the doctor shook his head. No stretcher would be needed. He came over to me, squatted down next to the chair, and looked me in the eye. "Senora," he said quietly and sympathetically, "I am very sorry. Your husband died of an acute myocardial infarction. Apparently death was instantaneous. He was not in pain or agony." The doctor's words came through a thick layer of absorbent cotton. Infarction. Death. Federico. These concepts existed somewhere separate from each other and did not fit together in my head. Just last night we'd had dinner together in the kitchen, him talking about plans to expand the store on the new street, complaining about the dairy suppliers who were overcharging. We were discussing whether to buy a new refrigerator for the house, planning the weekend. "But he was healthy," I whispered. "He never had heart problems." "Unfortunately, Senora, heart attacks can happen suddenly, especially in men after 50. Stress, overexertion, heredity. Many factors can contribute to it," the doctor explained. "Sometimes the body does not give warning signals." The doctor explained that it would be necessary to issue a death certificate, that the body would be taken to the morgue for the necessary procedures and paperwork, that the funeral home could be called only after all the certificates had been received. He talked about formalities, about paperwork, about procedures, and I listened and nodded, but the words slipped past my mind without lingering. Rosario took over communicating with the medics. She wrote down the morgue's phone numbers in her notebook, asked me what time I could pick up the certificates, asked me practical questions about what to do next. I was grateful to her for this care. It was impossible for me to go into details myself. I sat in the chair and looked at my husband. The doctor covered his face with the white sheet he had brought with him. Federico had always been a strong man. Broad shoulders, strong arms that easily lifted heavy boxes of goods, thick black hair with a noble graying at the temples. He was a handsome man, and I was proud that he had chosen me out of all the girls in our town 30 years ago. Now, under the sheet, he seemed small and defenseless. When the paramedics finally left, promising to send a car to transport the body to the morgue, the house was quiet and deserted. Rosario made me a strong tea with sugar and made me drink it, even though I couldn't taste it. "Señora, we need to call the girls," she said softly, "and Don Federico's relatives." I nodded, but didn't move. The thought of having to say the words about my husband's death out loud seemed unbearable. How to explain to the children that their father was gone? How to find the right words? Rosario picked up her cell phone and dialed Amelia's number. The eldest daughter worked as a manager in one of our stores and was usually there in the morning. "Señorita Amelia? It's Rosario. You need to come home immediately. Don Federico has had an accident. Yes, it's very urgent. Mrs. Valeria is waiting for you." Half an hour later, while I was still sitting in the study next to my husband's covered body, Amelia burst into the house. She flew into the study like a hurricane without taking off her coat, her hair disheveled from her fast ride, her eyes red and frightened. "Where is he? Where's Daddy?" she screamed until she saw the sheet-covered body on the chair. No, this can't be happening. What happened? Mom, what happened?" Esteban, her husband, came in behind her. He was calmer, but his face was grim and focused. Esteban had been the accountant in our family business for 5 years since he married Amelia. He was a smart guy, though sometimes he seemed a little too calculating for his 31 years. But Amelia loved him, and that was all that mattered. Amelia rushed over to me, hugged me tight, and we both cried. Her tears were hot and sincere, and for a few minutes I felt that I was not alone in my grief. But after a few minutes, she pulled away, wiped her eyes, and turned to Rosario. "Rosario, tell me what the doctor said. What exactly happened to Dad?" "A heart attack, señorita. The doctor said death was instantaneous." "What documents do we need? What's the next step?" Amelia's voice had a commanding tone that I knew well from her childhood. Even as a little girl, she liked to lead games, assign roles, make decisions for other children. Now this character trait was manifested with a new force. "The doctor said that first we need a certificate from the morgue," Rosario said, "and then we can call the funeral home." "I see," Amelia nodded and turned to her husband. "Esteban, call the Mendoza Funeral Home. They're the most reliable in town. Find out what you need to organize the funeral, what documents, how long it will take to prepare. We need to organize everything at the highest level." I looked at my daughter and didn't recognize her. She was only 28 years old, but she spoke with such confidence in business as if she had been organizing funerals all her life. There was a new determination in her movements that I hadn't noticed before. Esteban pulled out his cell phone and began to make a call. He spoke softly, but I could hear the phrases mahogany casket, floral arrangements, church service, memorial dinner. All of these words referred to my husband, but they were discussed without my input. Amelia sat next to me in the second chair Rosario had brought from the living room and took my hands in hers. Her palms were warm and soft, but there was a certain insistence in her touch. "Mom, I know how hard this is for you," she said, looking into my eyes. "But you have to hold on. Daddy wouldn't want to see us weak. He always said we have to be strong in hard times. I'll organize everything, don't worry about it." There was genuine concern in her words, but also something else. Some new confidence, a determination that alarmed me. Amelia had always been an active and energetic child, but now something else was awakening in her, a desire to control the situation, to make decisions. "I need to call Catalina," I said, remembering my youngest daughter. "Don't worry, Mom. I've already sent her a message, and she'll be right over," Amelia replied. "And while Esteban is dealing with the funeral home, let's make a list of people who need to be notified: relatives, friends of Dad's, business associates." She pulled a notebook and pen out of her purse, opened it to a blank page. "Uncle Carlos, Aunt Mercedes, Cousin Roberto," she began to list, jotting down names. "The Gutierrez family, they're our neighbors. Don Pablo from the bank, an old friend of Dad's, the suppliers from Cordoba." As I listened to her make the list, I realized that many of the people on the list I wouldn't even remember in my condition. Amelia knew her father's business connections better than I did. She worked in the family business and was in frequent contact with partners and clients. An hour later, Catalina, the youngest daughter, arrived. She worked as an elementary school teacher and was always softer and calmer than Amelia. She had kind brown eyes and a quiet voice, and the children at school adored her. Catalina entered the office and immediately cried when she saw her father's body covered with a sheet. "Daddy," she sobbed as she approached the chair. "How did it happen? He was healthy, strong." I stood up to hug my youngest daughter, but Amelia was ahead of me. She clasped her sister tightly to her and began to whisper something in her ear. Catalina nodded, still crying but gradually calming down. "Mama," Catalina said when the tears subsided, "Amelia says she's going to take care of the funeral arrangements. It's probably the right thing to do. You're in such a state, you need to rest." I wanted to object, to say that Federico was my husband, and I should decide how to bury him, where to hold the ceremony, who to invite. 30 years of marriage gave me that right, but the words stuck in my throat. Indeed, I was in deep shock, unable to connect two thoughts, to make the simplest decision. Amelia was already making lists, calling relatives, making arrangements with the funeral home. "Aunt Mercedes? It's Amelia Cordero," she said into the phone, pacing around the office. "I have some sad news. Dad died of a heart attack this morning. Yes, very sudden. We're planning the funeral for Thursday. I'll confirm the exact time tomorrow. St. Teresa's Church, then Las Flores Cemetery. Yes, of course. I'll give your mom your condolences." She spoke confidently and clearly, naming specific dates and places, though she had not discussed these details with me or Catalina. Esteban wrote down the information in his notebook, sometimes giving his wife phone numbers or clarifying details. By mid-afternoon, the house began to fill with people. Rosario opened the door and welcomed guests who had heard about the incident from neighbors or on the phone. Our neighbors arrived: the Gonzalez couple, Don Miguel from the store next door, several employees from our outlets. All of them came with sad faces, shaking my hands, saying words of comfort. Amelia met each one at the entrance to the living room, accepted condolences, told me the details of the funeral that was already being planned. I watched her and marveled at how easily and naturally she took on this role. It was as if she had been preparing her whole life to be the one in charge of our family. Rosario brought coffee and cookies for the guests and set the cups on the big table in the living room. People gathered in small groups, talking quietly, sharing memories of Federico. I heard snippets of phrases. "He was a good man, an honest merchant. He always helped if asked. It's a pity he left so early." I sat in a corner of the living room and listened to these conversations. It was strange to me to hear my husband spoken of in the past tense. Just this morning he had been alive, and now people were remembering him as deceased. Around 3 in the afternoon, the funeral home representative arrived, an older man in a black suit with a serious face. Amelia met him personally and led him into the office, where they talked for a long time. I could hear their muffled voices, but I didn't go into detail. When they left the office, Amelia came to me. Mom, the bureau rep says we need to pick out a suit for Dad. Is his blue suit okay? The one he wore at my wedding?" I nodded. That suit really suited Federico the best. He'd bought it for his daughter's wedding 3 years ago, and since then he'd only worn it on special occasions. "And Mom," Amelia continued, "I think we should have a memorial dinner at El Mirador. It'll be too crowded at home with all the people coming." Dad was a respected man, with many friends and acquaintances. "But Federico didn't like pomp," I whispered. "He always said that funerals should be modest, unspent." Amelia sat down beside me and took my hand. I saw something new in her eyes, not just concern, but a kind of condescension, as if she were talking to a child. Mom, Dad was a successful business owner, a respected man in our town. He had many friends, partners, clients. You can't bury him poorly, modestly. People won't understand, they'll think we're in financial trouble. Esteban came over to us and nodded, supporting his wife. Valeria, Amelia is absolutely right, he said in a serious tone. Federico deserves a decent funeral. And then think of the family's reputation, the future of the business. The next morning, I woke up feeling like yesterday had been a nightmare. For a few seconds, I lay in bed listening to the silence of the house, almost believing I was about to hear Federico's footsteps in the hallway or the sound of water pouring from the shower in his bathroom. But the house was silent. His untouched pillow lay beside me, and on the nightstand were his glasses, which he had taken off before going to bed and would never wear again. Rosario was already in the kitchen. I could hear the familiar sounds of morning cooking. The smell of coffee wafted up the stairs. But today it wasn't a happy smell, but rather a reminder that life goes on even when it seems like the world should stop. I came downstairs in my robe and slippers. Rosario silently handed me a cup of tea. She realized that coffee would be inappropriate now. The tea was strong, sweet, warming. Outside the window, a new day was beginning, and the sun was lighting up our garden, but it all seemed unreal. Rosario, I need to go to the funeral home, I said, taking a sip of tea. Amelia had organized a lot of things yesterday, but I need to check it out for myself to make sure it's going to be the way Federico would have wanted it. Rosario nodded, but I saw doubt in her eyes. Señora, does Señorita Amelia know that you want to change things? Not yet, but he is my husband and I must decide how to bury him. I put on the black dress I only wore on special occasions and drove into town. The funeral home was in the main square, in an old building with high ceilings and marble floors. The same elderly man in a black suit who had spoken to Amelia yesterday met me at the entrance. Señora Cordero, I'm sorry for your loss, he said, shaking my hand. Your daughter discussed everything in great detail with us yesterday. Yes, but I would like to change something, I replied. My husband was a modest man. He didn't like pomp. I think the ceremony should be simpler. The man pulled out a thick folder of documents and began to list the things Amelia had ordered. An oak coffin with bronze handles, a funeral procession of 6 cars, floral arrangements of white roses and chrysanthemums for over 2,000 pesos, a memorial dinner at a restaurant for 150 people. It's too expensive and too lavish, I said. My husband would like something more modest, a simple wooden coffin, plain flowers, a wake at home. But Señora, the man hesitated, your daughter has already paid the deposit, and the order has been given to the suppliers. Last-minute changes will cost extra money. I felt irritation rising inside. Amelia was acting like I was incapacitated, like I couldn't make decisions about my own husband's funeral. How much is the bail? I'm willing to pay extra for the change. 3,000 pesos, señora, and the additional costs for the alterations will be another 1,000, 4,000 pesos. It was a considerable sum, but I was willing to pay to bury Federico the way he would have wanted. I returned home with the new contracts and receipts. Amelia was waiting for me in the living room, sitting at the desk with the phone in her hands, writing something down in a notebook. Mom, where have you been? She asked, not taking her eyes off the notes. I needed to consult with you about the music at the church. I was at the funeral home, I answered, sitting down in the chair across from her. Amelia, I need to talk to you. Now she raised her head and looked at me carefully. What's wrong? I changed some of the details of the funeral. Dad didn't like the pageantry. He wanted something more modest. Amelia's face changed, her eyebrows furrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. What exactly did you change? The casket, the flowers, the restaurant. I canceled the wake at El Mirador. We'll do it at home, the way he liked it. Amelia stood up abruptly from the table. There was a tension in her movements that I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. Mom, you can't do this. I've already organized everything. People are waiting for invitations. I've made arrangements with the restaurant. Amelia, this is my husband, I said as calmly as I could. I have the right to decide how he's buried. Your husband? Amelia's voice rose. He was my father, and he wouldn't want to look like a beggar in front of the whole town. At that moment, Esteban entered the living room. He heard the raised voices, and decided to intervene. He was followed by Catalina, who had arrived after her work at school. "What's going on?" Esteban asked, shifting his gaze from his wife to me. "Mom canceled all my arrangements," Amelia said, barely holding back tears of anger. "She wants to bury Papa in some poor way." Esteban frowned and stepped closer. "Valeria, I realize this is hard for you, but Amelia is right. Federico was a respected businessman, the owner of 4 stores. His funeral is the face of our family." "The face of the family?" I said it again. Federico always said that the most important thing is not to show off, but to conduct a person with dignity. "Mom," Catalina intervened in a soft voice, "maybe Amelia is right. After all, at the funeral will come a lot of people who knew Daddy at work. Suppliers, customers, competitors. If we do it modestly, they might think we're in financial trouble." I looked at my youngest daughter and realized she was on her sister's side too. Catalina had always been soft and compliant, but now she sounded as logical as Amelia. "Catalina, your father wasn't a show-off," I said. "He valued simplicity and honesty." But Mom," Catalina continued, "times have changed. It's important to maintain an image now, especially in business." Amelia took advantage of her sister's encouragement and moved closer to me. "Mama, I've already spent the whole day organizing. I've called all the relatives, made arrangements with the church, ordered flowers. You can't just cancel at the last minute." "I can," I said firmly, "and I would do it." Esteban shook his head. "Valeria, think about the consequences. If we cancel at the restaurant, we'll have to pay a penalty, plus new expenses. It'll cost more than leaving it as it is." "I don't care about the money," I said. "I want the funeral to be in keeping with my husband's character." Amelia sat back down at the table and pressed her face into her palms. She was silent for a few seconds, then raised her head. I saw cold determination in her eyes. "Okay, Mom, do as you wish. But then organize everything yourself. I'll wash my hands of it." "Amelia!" Catalina exclaimed. "Don't say that." "No, Catalina, if Mommy thinks she can decide everything on her own, let her do it herself. I'm tired of arguing." Amelia stood up and headed for the exit. She turned around at the door. "Just so you know, Mom, if you ruin Dad's funeral with your stinginess, I won't forgive you." The door slammed and Amelia left. Esteban followed, but he gave me a disapproving look before he left. Catalina stayed behind, but she looked confused. "Mom, maybe we should find a compromise," she asked quietly. "What kind of compromise, Catalina?" "Your sister wants to put on a show, and I want to give Father a decent burial." But Amelia tried. She really did a lot. She was trying to prove herself, not to honor her father's memory. Catalina sighed and got ready to leave as well. "I need to go home. I have to go to school early tomorrow. If you need anything, call me." When the daughters left, the house was silent again. I sat in the living room and felt terribly alone. For the first time in 30 years of marriage, I needed to make important decisions on my own, and even my own children were against me. I decided to call Soledad. My friend always knew how to listen and give sound advice. We had been friends since childhood, growing up on the same street together, going to school together. Soledad never married and devoted herself to working in the library and raising her nephews. She was an intelligent, sensible woman whose judgment I trusted. "Soledad, it's Valeria," I said into the phone. "Can you come over? I need your help." "Of course, darling. I was just about to come to you. Rosario called to tell me about Federico. Hang in there. I'll be there in half an hour." Soledad arrived with a bag of groceries and flowers from her garden. She hugged me tight and long without saying a word. In her embrace, I felt the warmth and understanding I had been missing all day. "Tell me what's going on," she said, sitting me down on the couch in the living room. I told her about yesterday, about Amelia taking over the funeral arrangements, about today's conflict over the changes. "I understand." Soledad nodded. Amelia had always been an active girl, but now she must have decided that it was her time. "I don't understand what's happening to her. It's as if her father's death is an opportunity for her to show that she's in charge of the family." "And Catalina?" "Catalina supports her sister. She talks about thinking about the family's image, about business." Soledad shook her head thoughtfully. "The girls grew up in a different time, Valeria. For them, status is important. showmanship. They don't realize that real dignity is in simplicity. We talked for another hour when Amelia returned to the house. She walked into the living room, saw Soledad, and nodded dryly. "Good evening, Aunt Soledad." "Good evening, Amelia. My condolences to you and your family." Amelia sat down in the chair across from us and looked at me. "Mom, I've been thinking, and I've decided to give you one last chance. Let's go back to the way things were. Let's undo the changes you've made and give you a decent funeral." "Amelia," Soledad intervened, "maybe you should listen to your mother. She knew your father better than anyone." Amelia turned to Soledad with a cold expression. "Aunt Soledad, with respect for your age, but these are family matters. You don't have to interfere." "Amelia!" I was outraged. "How dare you talk to Soledad like that? And how dare she interfere in our affairs?" Amelia raised her voice. "This is our family, our problems." Soledad got up from the couch. "Valeria, maybe I should leave. I don't want to be the cause of conflict." "No, stay," I said firmly. "I need you." Amelia stood up abruptly and walked to the window, turning her back to us. "You know what, Mom? I'm tired of these arguments. Father is dead, and now someone has to make the decisions in this family. Someone has to think about the future, the business, the reputation." She turned to face us, and I saw something new in her eyes, a hardness that wasn't there before. "I'm the eldest daughter. I have experience in the family business. Esteban is an accountant. He understands financial matters. Catalina supports our decisions, and you, Mom, are just a housewife who's done nothing but cook and clean for 30 years. "Amelia!" Soledad exclaimed. "What are you saying?" "I'm telling the truth," Amelia continued implacably. "Mom doesn't understand anything about business, about modern life. She lives in the last century. I looked at my daughter and didn't recognize her. She was not the girl I had raised, not the young woman who had cried tears of grief yesterday." "Amelia," I said quietly, "I'm your mother. Yes, you are my mother, and I respect you. But times have changed. I will now be making the important decisions in this family, about the funeral and everything else." Soledad stood up and approached Amelia. "Girl, you're forgetting yourself. Your mother just lost her husband yesterday. She needs support, not more problems." Amelia looked at Soledad with poorly concealed irritation. "Aunt Soledad, once again, please don't interfere. This is between our family. Your mother has been my best friend for 40 years. Her problems concern me too." "Then you can work it out together," Amelia said coldly. "And I'll handle family matters." She headed for the exit, but stopped at the door and turned around. "And by the way, Mother, I'm going to the bank tomorrow morning to find out about Dad's accounts and how the business will now be run. I guess that's also part of my responsibilities as the eldest in the family." The door slammed again, leaving Soledad and me alone. "Valeria," my friend said quietly, "what's going on with that girl?" "I don't know," I answered, feeling the tears welling up. It was as if Federico's death had released something in her. Cruel. Soledad sat down beside me and took my hand. "Maybe it's from grief. People react differently to loss." "No, Soledad, it's not grief, it's something else. Amelia's acting like her father's death is her opportunity to be in charge, like she's been waiting for this." We sat in silence for a few minutes. It was starting to get dark outside the window. The day was drawing to a close. Tomorrow would be the funeral as Amelia saw it, not me. "Valeria," Soledad said, "maybe we should give in for now. The funeral is only one day, and then you can assert your rights." "What rights?" I asked bitterly. "You heard what she said. I'm just a housewife who doesn't understand anything. That's not true, and you know it. But she's right about one thing. I really haven't worked for 30 years, haven't run a business. It was all Federico's business. But you were the backbone of the family, raising the kids, making a home. That's important work, too." Rosario brought us tea and cookies. She was silent, but I could see sympathy and understanding in her eyes. Our housekeeper had witnessed all the family events of the last 15 years. She knew us better than we thought. "Rosario?" I asked. "What do you think about all this?" Rosario was silent, choosing her words. Señorita Amelia has changed a lot in the last few days. She used to be different." "Different how?" "More gentler. Now she's bossing everyone around like it's her house. With Soledad gone, I'm alone in the big house. Tomorrow is my husband's funeral, but it won't go the way he wanted. Tomorrow I will bury Federico, but I will feel like a guest at my own funeral. Thursday, the day of the funeral, began with gray skies and drizzling rain. I woke up at 6:30 in the morning, even though my alarm clock was set for 7. Sleep was gone, and I lay in bed, listening to the drops tapping on the window. Even the sky seemed to be crying for Federico. Rosario was already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast for the guests who would be arriving in the morning. Amelia had made a precise schedule last night: a condolence party at home at 9 in the morning, a coffin service at 11, then a church service, then the cemetery, followed by a memorial dinner at El Mirador. It was all according to her plan, with no changes from me. I wore the black dress I bought for my mother-in-law's funeral 5 years ago. At the time, I thought I'd never have to wear it again. I clasped the only pearl beads around my neck, a gift from Federico for our 10th wedding anniversary. The mirror reflected a pale woman with eyes red from sleeplessness. I looked like a ghost. By 8 in the morning, the house began to fill with people. The men from the funeral home arrived first. They brought the casket and set it up in the large living room. Oak, with bronze handles, exactly as Amelia had ordered. Federico lay in his blue suit, his face waxy but calm. He was surrounded by white roses and chrysanthemums, expensive flowers that he had never bought in his lifetime. Amelia appeared by 9:30, already fully prepared. She was in an elegant black suit, her hair in a tight bun, her makeup flawless despite the tears of the last few days. She was followed by Esteban in a new black suit and Catalina in a dark blue dress. All looked solemn and dignified. "Mom," Amelia said, looking me over, "maybe you should comb your hair. People are going to start coming in now." I machine-combed my hair. I must have looked really unkempt. I hadn't taken much care of myself the last few days. "I look fine," I said. "Whatever you say." Amelia shrugged and headed for the coffin. At 9 in the morning, the first guests started arriving. Neighbors, relatives, acquaintances, business colleagues, all of them came into the living room, approached the coffin, baptized, then went to express their condolences to the family. And then I noticed a strange thing. People were coming up to Amelia first, not me. She was standing next to the casket, shaking hands, listening to words of comfort, answering questions about how it all happened. She acted as if she were a widow, not the deceased's daughter. "Amelia, please accept our sincere condolences," said the elderly Senora Martinez, our longtime neighbor. "Federico was a wonderful man." "Thank you, Senora Martinez. Yes, it's a great loss for all of us," Amelia replied with dignity. "If you need anything, please don't hesitate to contact us. We're always here to help." "Thank you very much. We can handle it, but your support means a lot." People nodded, shook her hand again, and only then, almost as if by chance, did they approach me. "Valeria, hang in there," they said briefly, then backed away. Esteban was standing next to his wife, also accepting condolences, discussing business matters with the men. They talked about the future of the stores, about who would be in charge of everything now. Again, everyone was addressing him and Amelia, not me, the widow of the business owner. By 10 in the morning, the house was full of people. The living room was sweltering with lots of flowers and human breath. Rosario was serving coffee and cookies. People were talking in hushed voices. Children were playing in the back rooms. The atmosphere was solemn but not mournful, more like a formal reception. I stood in the corner of the living room and watched this strange spectacle. My husband was lying in a coffin in the middle of the room, and I felt like an extra at his own funeral. Amelia was directing everything that was going on, telling Rosario where to put the extra chairs, explaining to people how to get to the restaurant after the cemetery. Around 11:30, I decided to go over to the casket. I wanted a few minutes alone with Federico to say a real goodbye to him, but as I walked towards the coffin, Amelia noticed my intentions and came quickly over. "Mom, wait," she said, blocking my way. "The photographer is about to take pictures for the paper. It's best not to get in the way." "What photographer?" I didn't understand. "The local paper. They want to write an article about Dad, a respected businessman, a philanthropist. It's good for the family's reputation. I saw a young man with a camera taking pictures of the coffin and the flowers. Federico hated being photographed, avoided publicity, and now his death was becoming a media event. Amelia, Papa didn't like this kind of publicity, I said, and I want to say goodbye to my husband. It's my right. Mom, it's important for business. Customers need to know that the family is still in business. I tried to step around my daughter, but she got in the way again. Amelia, get out of the way. I want to go to the casket. Mom, not now. You see, there's a lot of people here. It has to be organized. Organized? My voice is starting to rise. This is my husband's funeral, not a business event. The conversation began to attract the attention of the guests. People were turning around, whispering about what was going on. Esteban approached us and tried to calm the situation. Valeria, let's not make a scene. Wait a bit, then you'll come over. Scenes? I didn't believe what I heard. I want to say goodbye to my own husband. Mom, Amelia said firmly, you're being inappropriate. Everyone is looking at you. Let them look. This is my house, my husband. At that moment, Catalina came up to us, frightened by the raised voices. What's going on? She asked quietly. Your mother is throwing a tantrum, Amelia said coldly. At such a solemn moment. Something inside me snapped. The pain, the humiliation, the alienation that had built up over the past 3 days all came rushing out. Hysterical! I screamed. I'm trying to go near my husband's coffin and my daughter won't let me. The living room went quiet. All the talking stopped. All eyes turned to us. Amelia turned pale with anger. Mother, stop it now! You're embarrassing us all! I'm an embarrassment? Who turned the funeral into a circus? Who invited the photographers? Booked the restaurants? Esteban tried to take my hand. Valeria, calm down. Let's go outside and talk separately. I pulled my hand out. Don't touch me! You're all crazy! It's my husband lying in a coffin, and you're putting on a show! Amelia came right up to me. I saw cold fury in her eyes. That's enough, Mother. You're acting crazy. Don't ruin Daddy's last day with your tantrums. How dare you tell me what to do? I shouted. I've been this man's wife for 30 years. And what have you done for 30 years? Shouted Amelia. Stayed at home, cooked borscht. And who worked next to Dad? Who knows his business? Who has the right to make decisions? The living room froze. Relatives, neighbors, business associates, all stood and listened to the daughter humiliate her mother at her father's funeral. Amelia, I whispered, it's your father. How can you do this? That's exactly why I won't let you ruin his memory. Amelia spoke louder and louder. You're not worthy of the grief you're showing. You're not worthy to stand by his coffin. Amelia! Catalina exclaimed. What are you saying? I am telling the truth. Amelia turned to her sister. Mama never understood Papa, never appreciated his work, and now she's making a spectacle of himself. Amelia, stop it. Aunt Mercedes tried to intervene. No. Amelia said no. Enough. Mom, if you can't behave yourself, you'd better leave. Leave the funeral. We can manage without your tantrums. The silence in the living room became deafening. People looked at me with pity, embarrassment, incomprehension. A daughter was kicking her mother out of her own husband's funeral. Amelia, I whispered. What happened to you? Nothing happened to me. I just grew up. I'm taking responsibility for my family, and you... She gave me a scornful look. You're still a big baby. Esteban silently supported his wife, taking her under his arm. Catalina stood between us, crying, but saying nothing. I'm not leaving, I said quietly. He's my husband. You will, Amelia shouted sharply. And right now, you don't deserve to be here. You don't deserve the grief you're showing. Get out of the funeral, the guests gasped. A daughter was kicking her mother out of her own husband's funeral. Aunt Mercedes covered her mouth with her hand. Uncle Carlos shook his head. Amelia, Catalina exclaimed. How can you? I can, and I must. Amelia cut her off. Mom is disgracing Dad's memory with her behavior. Go away, Mommy, go now. Amelia, stop it. Aunt Mercedes tried to intervene. No, enough of this. Amelia pointed at the door. Mom, get out. We'll see Daddy off without you. Esteban, take her out. Valeria, let's go. It's better for everyone. Amelia, no. Catalina tried to intercede, but her voice was weak. Catalina, don't interfere. You see, Mama can't control herself. Let her go home and come to her senses. Esteban came to me. Valeria, let's go. It's better for everyone. I looked at the guests. Their eyes were sympathetic, but no one was going to interfere in a family scandal. I looked at Catalina. The youngest daughter was crying, but she didn't say a word. I looked at Amelia, who stood stone-faced, determined and ruthless. All right, I said quietly. I'll go. But remember, Amelia, I am your mother, and that will never change. I will, she replied dryly. I walked through the crowd of guests toward the exit. People parted. Some tried to say something, but I didn't listen. I turned around one last time at the door, and Amelia was already accepting condolences as if nothing had happened. I got into a cab and gave Soledad's address. As the car drove down the familiar streets, I didn't cry. The tears were gone. All that was left was a feeling of emptiness and coldness. My daughter kicked me out of my own husband's funeral. That should never have happened. Along the way, I thought about what was happening to my family. Just 3 days ago, I had a husband. My daughters respected me. I was the mistress of my own home. Now I was an outcast, not allowed to say goodbye to my own husband. Soledad welcomed me with hugs and hot tea. Her small house was cozy and warm, not like my large mansion where Amelia was now in charge. Tell me everything in detail, she said. And I did. About how Amelia acted like a widow, how she made all the decisions, how I was sidelined, about how I had become superfluous in my own home. What's going on with that girl? Soledad shook her head. I've known her since she was a little girl. She wasn't this cruel. I don't know. It's like her daddy's death has released something dark in her. We talked late into the night. Soledad tucked me in the guest room, gave me a warm blanket and herbal tea to sleep on. But sleep didn't come. I lay in a strange bed and thought about how tomorrow I would have to decide how to live my life. It was raining outside the window, like the morning of the funeral. It seemed that the sky was still weeping, not only for Federico, but also for me. The third day at Soledad's house began with a quiet rain outside the window. I woke up in the small guest room, and for a few seconds I didn't realize where I was. Then everything came back to mind. The funeral, the scandal, the humiliation when my own daughter kicked me out of my husband's funeral. In those 3 days, I had hardly left Soledad's house, just sat by the window and watched the rain that had been pouring steadily since Thursday. Amelia's words still echoed in my ears. Get out of the funeral. You don't deserve to be here. How could a daughter say that to her mother? How could she kick me out on the hardest day of my life? Soledad was a delicate hostess. She didn't ask unnecessary questions, didn't try to cheer me up with false optimism. She simply cared, cooking simple meals I could swallow, making herbal teas, giving me space to be sad. Her small house on a quiet street became my refuge from the world in which I suddenly found myself exiled. Valerie, she said Saturday morning, handing me a cup of mint tea, you need to eat. You hardly ate anything yesterday. I looked at the plate of toast and homemade jam. The food seemed tasteless, and my throat constricted as I tried to swallow even a sip of tea. My whole body seemed to refuse to function normally. I can't, I whispered. It's all clumpy. I understand. But you're going to need your strength. You can't exhaust yourself like this. Soledad sat down next to me at the small kitchen table. It was drizzling outside, and her cozy kitchen, with its yellow curtains and pots of geraniums on the windowsill, seemed like the only warm place in the world. Maybe we should call Catalina, she suggested. After all, she was the youngest daughter. She might be more understanding. No, I shook my head. You saw the way she acted at the funeral. Catalina didn't stand up for me when Amelia kicked me out. She cried, but she didn't say a word. I'm as much of a nuisance to her as I am to her eldest daughter. Soledad sighed. She'd known my girls since they were little, remembered when they'd come to her library for books. Back then, Catalina was a quiet, dreamy girl who could sit in the corner for hours reading stories, and Amelia was always active, demanding, used to getting what she wanted. Amelia has always been strong, Soledad said thoughtfully. But strength can be different. There is strength that protects, and there is strength that represses. I'm afraid my daughter has the latter, I replied bitterly. She kicked me out of her own father's funeral. That should never have happened. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. Soledad went to open it, and I heard a familiar voice, Rosario. Our housekeeper was talking to Soledad in the hallway, and I could tell by her tone that she was agitated. Señora Valeria. Rosario entered the kitchen, removing a wet handkerchief from her head. I had to come and see you. I could not keep silent any longer. Rosario looked tired and upset. Usually calm and composed, she was clearly on edge. She sat down at the table, accepted a cup of coffee from Soledad, and began to talk. Señora, what is going on in your house is an outrage. Señorita Amelia is acting as if she owns the house. What do you mean? I asked, feeling my heart clench with a premonition of something terrible. They have moved, Señora. Amelia and Don Esteban. Friday night, right after the wake, they brought their things and took the master bedroom. Your and Don Federico's bedroom. Rosario's words hit me like a slap. The master bedroom was the sacred place where Federico and I had lived for 30 years, where we shared our joys and sorrows, where we made plans for the future. And Amelia took it the same day she kicked me out of the funeral. How dare they? I whispered. Señorita Amelia said she was the lady of the house now, and she wanted the master bedroom, and she told me to move your things into the guest room. My things? I couldn't believe what I heard. Yes, Señora. Clothes, jewelry, photographs. Everything was boxed up and moved to the small room next to the kitchen, the one where the rare guests used to stay. Soledad gasped. This is bullying. Valeria, you can't stand it. Rosario continued to tell, and with each word the picture grew darker and darker. Amelia hadn't just moved into the house, she'd completely rearranged it to suit her. She'd rehung the paintings, rearranged the furniture, turned the children's room into a home office for Esteban. What about Federico's office? I asked, afraid to hear the answer. That's the worst part, Señora. Señorita Amelia spends her days there, going through Don Federico's papers, sorting through his papers. Yesterday she found the key to the safe and opened it. She opened her husband's safe? I felt my anger rising. Without authorization? She said she had the right, as daughter and successor in title. There were store records, bank statements, some contracts. She's going over everything with Don Esteban. Rosario spoke, and I imagined Amelia sitting in Federico's chair, rummaging through his personal papers, disposing of documents he'd collected all his life. It was sacrilege. Señora, Rosario continued, I've been working for your family for 15 years. I have seen the girls grow up. I have seen Don Federico build a business. But I don't understand this kind of behavior. Señorita Amelia acts as if you were dead, not Don Federico. And Catalina? Does she live there too? No, ma'am. Catalina only comes in the evenings to have dinner and talk to her sister. But she supports all of Amelia's decisions. She says Amelia is good for taking responsibility. Soledad got up and started pacing around the kitchen. I could see that she was as outraged as I was. Valeria, this is iniquitous. You're a legal widow, you have rights. What rights? I asked tiredly. I've been a housewife for 30 years. I haven't worked. I don't know the law. I don't understand business. Amelia knows this very well and takes advantage of it. Rosario leaned across the table to me. Señora, but Don Federico loved you. He couldn't leave you destitute. Surely there must be a will, some documents. A will? I wondered. Federico sometimes talked about getting it drawn up, but he put it off. He said it was too early to think about such things. Maybe he had time to do something after all, Soledad suggested. Businessmen usually take care of such things. We discussed the situation for another half hour. Rosario gave details of how Amelia was running the house. She changed the cleaning schedule, fired the gardener Federico had kept for 10 years, and began to control grocery costs. Señora, Rosario said before leaving, I want you to know that whatever happens, I'm on your side. Don Federico was a good man, and you were a good wife and mother. What's happening now is wrong. After Rosario left, Soledad and I sat in silence for a long time. The rain outside the window was getting heavier, and the house was completely dark, even though it was only 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Valeria, Soledad said at last, you need to know the truth about the will. If Federico left the documents, Amelia has no right to keep them from you. But how will I know? It's not like she's going to tell me what she found in the safe. Did Federico have a family lawyer? A notary? Yes, Licence Esquivel, Gustavo Esquivel. He's been handling our family's affairs for 20 years. He's handled house purchases, business registrations. He's the man to go to. If there's a will, it should be notarized. The idea seemed reasonable, but I was afraid. What if Federico really left nothing? What if the law leaves everything to the children and I'm left with nothing? Then Amelia would be right, and I would really be a sponger in my own home. That evening, while we were eating a simple soup and bread, Soledad's phone rang. She picked it up, talked to someone for a few minutes, then handed the phone to me. This is Licence Esquivel. He's looking for you. I picked up the phone with trembling hands. Hello, Licensee. Mrs. Valeria, I finally found you. Amelia said you've gone to your relatives and won't be back for a week, but I need to see you urgently. What's wrong? I can't talk on the phone. Come to my office tomorrow, Monday, at 10 o'clock in the morning, and Amelia and Catalina will be there too. We have some very important matters to discuss. What matters? Madam, believe me, it's better not on the phone. See you later. He hung up, leaving me completely bewildered. Soledad looked at me questioningly. What did he want? To meet tomorrow morning. He said there were important matters, and that I should bring the girls. There must be a will, Soledad suggested. Why else would he be looking for you so urgently? But I'm afraid to go, I admitted. What if Amelia humiliated me again? After what happened at the funeral? Valeria, you have to go. Whatever it is, you have rights as a widow. I hardly slept at all that night. I tossed and turned in bed, imagining tomorrow's meeting. On the one hand, I hoped that Federico had taken care of my future. On the other hand, I was afraid of disappointment, and I was even more afraid of more humiliation from Amelia. In the morning, I woke up at Soledad's house with a heavy feeling in my chest. There was to be a meeting at Esquivel's licensee's office today, and I didn't know what to expect. At breakfast, my hands were shaking so badly that I could barely hold my coffee cup. Valeria, everything will be all right, Soledad encouraged me. But there was worry in her eyes, too. Federico loved you. He couldn't leave you destitute. I nodded, but inside I was afraid. What if there was no will? What if there was no will? What if all the property went to the children by law? Then Amelia would feel right, and I would be a beggar in my own home. At 10:30, I put on a black dress, the same one I had worn to the funeral. I had no other formal attire. Soledad walked me to the cab and gave me a big hug goodbye. Hang in there, honey, and remember, you're entitled to respect no matter what happens. Licensee Esquivel's office was in the heart of the city, in an old building with high windows and marble steps. I went up to the second floor and stopped at the door with a sign that read, Gustavo Esquivel, Attorney, Notary Public. Inside, voices could already be heard. The secretary, an older woman with gray hair, lifted her head from the typewriter. Senora Cordero? Come in. They're waiting for you in the reception area. In a small room with leather armchairs and bookshelves, Amelia and Esteban were already seated. They were the first to arrive and felt like masters of the situation. Amelia was dressed in a strict navy blue suit, her hair in an impeccable bun. She looked like a successful businesswoman, ready for important negotiations. Esteban was reading a document, occasionally underlining something with a pen. He had a briefcase of papers on his lap, so they must have prepared thoroughly. Mom, Amelia nodded to me without a smile. Punctuality is a good trait. I sat down in the chair across from them, uncomfortable under their scrutiny. Esteban pulled away from the papers and looked at me appraisingly. Valeria, are you ready for a serious conversation? Today, important issues of the future of the family business will be decided. Ready, I answered, though my heart was beating so loudly that I thought everyone could hear it. Catalina showed up a few minutes later. The youngest daughter looked excited and a little scared. She said hello to everyone, sat down next to Amelia, and began rubbing the handle of her purse. Catalina, Amelia said sternly, try to stay calm. We don't know what it's going to be about, but we have to be ready for anything. What could it be about? Catalina asked quietly. Probably about how to organize the inheritance. answered Esteban. "Documents on stores, bank accounts, real estate. All of it needs to be properly reissued." Amelia nodded. "Yes, and we'll need to decide who will take over the business. Esteban and I have experience. We know all the suppliers and customers." They spoke as if everything had already been decided, as if I were an extra in this conversation. Catalina listened attentively, nodding from time to time. I sat silent and felt like a stranger among my own children. At 10 a.m. sharp, the secretary announced that Licence Esquivel was ready to receive us. We got up and headed for his office door. Amelia went first, followed by Esteban, then Catalina. I went last, symbolizing my position in the family, in the background, in the shadows. At the entrance to the study, Amelia stopped suddenly and turned to me. "Mom," she said loud enough for everyone to hear, "are you sure you should be present when business matters are discussed? You don't know anything about it." "Amelia," Esteban said warningly, "not here." "No, I have to say it," Amelia continued, looking at me coldly. "Mother, you are not worthy to be present at the reading of the will. You've never been involved in Papa's affairs? You don't know the business. You'd better wait in the waiting room." Catalina lowered her eyes, clearly not wanting to get involved in the conflict. Esteban shook his head, but did not contradict his wife. "I'm staying," I said quietly but firmly. "This concerns me, too." "None of this concerns you," Amelia raised her voice. "Go away. You've been in everyone's way enough already." At that moment, the door of the office opened, and Licence Esquivel appeared on the threshold. He was a man of about 45, with graying temples and a stern face. He had been working with our family for 20 years and knew us all well. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking at Amelia disapprovingly. "Licenciado, I'm explaining to my mother that business matters are not her domain," Amelia replied, without losing her composure. Esquivel frowned. "Señorita Amelia, your mother is the legal widow of Federico Cordero. She has every right to be present at the reading of the will. In fact, she must be present. And you have no right to decide who may or may not be here." Amelia turned pale with surprise. Apparently, she hadn't expected such a sharp rebuff. "But the licensee—" "No buts," Esquivel cut her off. "I ask everyone to go to the office and behave appropriately." We entered a spacious office with dark furniture and framed portraits on the walls. Esquivel pointed us to the chairs in front of his desk. Amelia sat to the right, still looking annoyed after the reprimand. Catalina settled next to her sister, Esteban on the left. I took the chair in the center. On the table was a thick folder of documents and several sealed envelopes. Esquivel solemnly opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. "So," he began in an official tone, "3 years ago, on May 18, 2020, Federico Cordero made a will in my presence. The document is notarized and legally valid." Amelia stepped forward, and Esteban pulled out a notebook. Catalina clasped her hands together. I felt my heart start to beat faster. "According to the last will of the deceased," Esquivel continued, "all real property, including the family home on San Martin Street, the summer house in the suburbs, and the commercial premises where the stores are located, passes in equal shares to his wife, Valeria Encarnacion Cordero, and his youngest daughter, Catalina Cordero." Catalina gasped. Amelia straightened sharply in her chair. Esteban dropped his pen. "The entire family business, including the 4 stores, inventory, equipment, and business connections, also passes in equal shares to wife Valeria Encarnacion Cordero and youngest daughter Catalina Cordero." "That's impossible!" Amelia exclaimed, jumping up from her seat. Esquivel raised his hand, demanding silence. "All bank accounts, including the main account of the family business and personal savings, totaling about $800,000, also go in equal shares to the wife Valeria Encarnacion Cordero and the youngest daughter Catalina Cordero." Catalina covered her face with her hands. She clearly hadn't expected this turn of events. Esteban looked at the lawyer with disbelief, as if he was reading some wrong document. "What goes to Amelia's eldest daughter?" Esteban asked, though it was clear from his face that he was afraid to hear the answer. Esquivel turned the page. Amelia Cordero de Valverde bequeathed the sum of $100,000 in cash and her father's personal effects, Watches, cufflinks, photographs. $100,000? Amelia asked in a trembling voice. Is that all? That's everything about the material inheritance, Esquivel confirmed. Amelia sank into a chair, her face white as chalk. Esteban leaned toward her and whispered something in her ear, but she did not listen. Licenciado, said Esteban, when he recovered a little from the shock. This will can be challenged? After all, Amelia worked in the family business, knows all the customers and suppliers. The will was made in full compliance with the law, Esquivel replied. Federico Cordero was of sound mind and good judgment, had the right to dispose of his property as he saw fit. But that is unjust, Amelia exclaimed, finally finding her voice. I've devoted 5 years to the family business. I know every supplier, every customer. Your father took that into account, Esquivel said. And he left you a personal letter explaining his decision. He took out a sealed envelope with the words, "For Amelia," written on it. May I read it aloud? Or would you prefer to read it yourself? Read it aloud, Amelia said hoarsely. Let everyone hear. Esquivel opened the envelope and unfolded a sheet of paper. The handwriting was recognizably paternal, large, sprawling. My dear daughter Amelia, the lawyer began to read, if you are listening to this letter, it means that I am no longer alive and you have learned of the contents of my will. I know you are surprised and perhaps angry, but I have made this decision deliberately, and I believe it is a fair one. Amelia clenched her fists, her lips trembling. Over the years in our family business, you have shown yourself to be a capable and energetic young woman. But I've also seen how you treat your mother, with disdain and disrespect. You see her as weak and incapable of anything, forgetting that she's been the backbone of our family for 30 years. Catalina sobbed. I felt a lump rise to my throat. I've seen your greed, Amelia. I've seen you counting our money, planning what you're going to do with the inheritance. I've seen the way you look at the house and the shops as your property, even though I'm still alive. That's not true, Amelia shouted out. I hope a limited inheritance will teach you to appreciate what you have and to respect other people. $100,000 is more than most people see in a lifetime. Spend it wisely. Esquivel turned the sheet over. If you change, if you learn to be kinder and fairer, your mother and sister will help you. But if you stay as cruel and selfish as you are, you will live a life of loneliness. The choice is yours. With love, but also with disappointment, your father Federico. Silence hung in the study. Amelia sat stone-faced. Esteban was writing something in his notebook. Catalina was crying quietly. And I felt relieved for the first time in days. Is that all? Amelia asked in an icy tone. That's all about the will, Esquivel replied. There are still a few technical issues to reissue the documents, but they can be resolved later. Esteban raised his head from his notebook. Licenciado, and who will manage the business? Valeria doesn't know anything about it. According to the will, Valeria Cordero and Catalina Cordero can decide that themselves. They can run it jointly, they can hire a manager, they can sell the business. It's their right as owners. Amelia stood up abruptly. I see. So it was all decided in advance. Dad was just lying to all of us. Amelia, Catalina said quietly, maybe you shouldn't say that. Should we? Amelia turned to her sister. You got half of the inheritance without doing anything for the business, and I worked for 5 years and got crumbs. Amelia, I didn't ask for... You didn't ask for it, but you got it. Amelia grabbed her purse. Esteban, let's go. There's nothing more to do here. Esteban got up, but he stayed at the desk. Licenciado, we'll think about contesting the will. We'll consult with other lawyers. That's your right, Esquivel replied calmly. But I warn you, the will is legally impeccable. Amelia headed for the exit, but turned around at the door. Mother, I hope you're happy. You got what you wanted. All I wanted was justice, I replied quietly. Justice? Amelia grinned. Is that what you call justice? All right, let's see how you handle the stores without my help. She walked out. Esteban followed. It was just me, Catalina, and Licenciado Esquivel. Senora Valeria, said the lawyer, your husband was a wise man. He saw the characters of his daughters and made the right decision. Catalina was still crying. Mother, I didn't know. I never thought Dad would leave me half of the inheritance. Your father loved you, I said, hugging my youngest daughter, and he saw that you were a good and honest girl. But what are we going to do about the stores? I'm a teacher. I don't know anything about commerce. We'll figure it out, I said. We'll figure it out together. Half an hour later, we left the office of the licensee Esquivel. It was sunny outside. The rain had finally stopped. Catalina drove her car, and I took a cab to Soledad's house. On the way, I thought about Federico. He really saw everything and understood everything. Saw how Amelia felt about me, how she planned my future without my input, and he made a decision that would teach her a lesson. Now I had to learn to be the master of my own life. At 52, to start over. It was scary, but exciting at the same time. Federico had taken care of me, and now it was my turn to take care of myself.